Hi, everybody. It's me, Pamela Drennan, again with the CLCA board. I'm a communication director, and today I have the pleasure of being here with Renee Beebe and Melissa M.Morgan. They are going to be speakers at our upcoming CLCA 2019 conference. And today is October 17th. That means our conference is in just 8 days. I know, it's approaching so quickly. I can't believe that we will be on a plane on our way to Richmond, BC very shortly. So for anyone who's viewing, I just wanted to remind you, if you have signed up for one of the workshops on Friday, that we really stress to bring a doll. The speakers would like to have everyone have their own doll. And as well, we wanted to make note to wear comfortable clothing. In the mornings, we have Taya coming to do some yoga with us, so that's an option for everyone. And we also wanted everyone to feel very comfortable at this conference, and as we learn together. So I'm very excited. So make sure you tune into our social media pages on Facebook, our website, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date to our postings and any news that comes down the pipeline. So with me, I have Renee Beebe, who's an IBCLC, and Melissa M.Morgan, who's also an IBCLC. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, and today we're going to have a chat to get to know them before the conference. And maybe, Renee, you can start by giving us a little background on who you are and what was your journey into becoming an IBCLC?
Okay, sure. I've been thinking about this because I've looked at your other videos, and I think my journey is a little bit different. I was a teacher, a special ed teacher for 10 years, and had a baby. You know, that's usually the thing that sort of shifts things, right? And my intention was always to go back to work, but I was kind of I was in a foreign land. I was in Texas, and I'm from Seattle and in the Northwest, and I felt very much alone. So I had really no breastfeeding problems whatsoever. And what I think I've hear from so many other lactation consultants as they got into this field because somebody helped them and they wanted to help. And I guess in some ways it was similar, except that I was calling La Leche League constantly in the small town that I was in Texas to know what doctor should I go to for my birth, what hospital is best, you know, what should I do? And so I just went to a La Leche League meeting because I felt like I owed it to them because they helped me in a way without even meeting me. And I found my people. So I often think that I would not have gotten involved in this if I would have been amongst my friends in the Pacific Northwest who thought like me and, you know, parented like I wanted to. But being in a place that wasn't like that, I really needed this La Leche League support. And pretty soon they said, hey, you're answering more questions than you're asking, so why don't you become a leader? And so anyway, that's what happened. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as a lactation consultant. And once I found that out, then I started on my journey to get my 2,500 hours. And in 6 years, that's the way it used to be. Yeah, and started my private practice not knowing anybody else who was doing that. You know, back in those days, we just kind of made it up there was no Facebook, there was no way to talk to other folks. And so I did postpartum doula work for many years because that paid the bills while I built up my lactation practice. And now, you know, I feel like, oh, okay, I'm doing this, and this is my full-time job. So that's how it happened.
You're right. It is a different journey for you. And that's refreshing to see that, you know, lucky for you, you didn't have the challenges when you were breastfeeding your baby. But then lucky for those other mothers that you were there to support that, you know, you were able to kind of paint the picture that it doesn't have to be as bad as some people portray it to be, right? So that's important. And that really gives light to, the essence of us always thinking if we get the support and we're able to achieve, some good breastfeeding practices, then it could be a lot more of a blissful experience at the beginning for people. That's great. It is interesting that La Leche League does tie into a lot of people's journey too. So I really have to commend them. I know they have a strong history and they've been such an amazing support volunteer organization for the LCs, and basically they're part of the pioneers of the LCs, right? So that's great. I see you too, Melissa, also was a La Leche League leader as well too. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what you're up to now?
Yeah, it was my journey until La Leche League, or adding that portion of my journey was not added until a fair ways into my training. How I came to lactation was I was a corporate manager
Oh, really?
in my previous iteration, and had a thriving career. I loved what I did, but I was living in Seattle, actually, where Renee is now, and in Spokane, I'm in Liberty Lake, Washington now, which is totally on the opposite side of the state from Renee. And at that time, I was a young adult living in the city of Seattle and working in this corporate environment and traveling and loving life as a mid-20s something person, and became pregnant as a single mom. And, my drive to work in the morning was maybe an hour and a half in traffic. And, it was just kind of this rat race lifestyle that I was leading that I quickly realized was not going to be conducive to single motherhood. And so I moved back to my hometown and gave birth and was breastfeeding and needed a breast pump because I was going back to school. And for a career change, because I knew that lifestyle wasn't going to work for me anymore as a mom. And so I went to go buy a breast pump from the woman who turned out to become my lactation mentor, and bought my pump from her. And then she had a weekly breastfeeding support group that I started attending. And much like Renee, she eventually said to me, you're answering more questions than you're asking. I think you'd be really good at this work. What do you think about exploring that? And we ended up having a relationship where I worked in her office as her business manager, and she had a retail shop and a clinical space in private practice. And I ended up shadowing her for 3 years, and eventually then she turned into my mentor, and we ended up collecting hours. And at the time that I was pursuing my IBCLC, I had to have 4,000 hours, where Renee had 2,500 because of her college education. At that time, I didn't have my degree yet, and I had to have 4,000 hours. And so I knew that could be shortened by the La Leche League route. And at that time, I didn't qualify as a leader because I was a single mom and had to work. So that was so it didn't happen until my subsequent child, my second child, was born, and then I qualified because I was married and was able to stay home with my kids. And so I became a La Leche League leader at that point and ran a group in Liberty Lake for several years. Until my mentor finally said, yeah, I'm ready to retire. Like, are you going to take the test anytime soon? And that was in 2009. So 2010, I took the exam and certified, and the rest, as they say, is history. I've been, this is just like Renee, like, this is my gig. This is how I provide for my family as a lactation consultant, and I can't even imagine any other line of work ever again. It's so rewarding, as you know.
Yes, it is a rewarding career for sure. What a beautiful blend of bringing in some of your corporate business background and being able to help with your lactation consultant mentor, and then be able to take it on and continue that practice and build from it with your background and your skills. That's great. I really like that. So leading into my next question, is that how you guys met? Is when you guys were at one point both in Seattle?
No.
No, no, okay.
In fact, I think at the time that we elected to pursue the possibility of a partnership, we'd never even met face to face.
No.
So,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, so tell us a little bit about that then.
It's the magic of social media, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, as I remember it, I knew that Melissa had a relationship with in a physician's office and was providing lactation services there, and I didn't know anyone else who was doing that, and I had been asked to do the same thing here in Seattle, and basically the doctor that I was working with wanted to know kind of, let's see what other people are doing. And so Melissa and I talked a lot and Melissa helped me a lot and encouraged me to move forward with this whole thing. And then our billers actually ended up talking to each other and really helping with that process. And then as I started working in a physician's office, and Melissa and I have supported each other through that, like, well, how is this going for you? And how do you do this? And that kind of thing. And then we realized that we needed to help other people figure this out as well. So talk on that topic in 2016, and we still hadn't met at that point. So yeah, I think we'd known each other for a couple of years before that. I think it was around 2014 that we started talking a lot on Facebook.
I think that, you know, and there's just kind of expanding on that a little bit, is there's a specific skill set that is, you know, when you're a private practice lactation consultant working in a clinical environment without having an RN license to go along with your IBCLC especially, like there's a culture shock that occurs, and there's a lot of fine details that have to be worked out. And so we really did need to lean on each other, and it was you know, that awareness that, boy, this is a process and there's others. And then we started getting requests from other people that were wanting to do the same and experiencing the same challenges, and it just kind of segued into this, gosh, we really need to do this, we need to help everybody.
Yeah, so you recognize not only is there a gap in breastfeeding support, but also a gap in being able to pursue the lactation support and run a practice that it could be fulfilling and something that can support your career and your family as well too.
Well, yes, and one of the main things I think that Melissa and I have in common is that we feel really strongly that we should all be making a good living, you know, and so kind of everything that we have been pursuing together, and it's just kind of growing, because you should see our lists of things we want to accomplish with lactation practice. We just keep thinking of all these needs and how we can help to meet them, and there are just so many needs, but it's we know how to help people breastfeed, you know, that's not what we need to focus on. We're trying to focus on the business aspect.
And I think that's really important. And when we were doing the planning for the programming as board directors, we were really thrilled to come across the topics that you guys have as presentations. And we also agree that being able to run a practice confidently, efficiently, you know, so that it can blossom. Because you're right, it's not particularly just the hands-on skill that can be a challenge, but it's just like, well, all the background work, you know, which takes a lot of time. And, you know, we all have families, and, you know, we want to know that our time that we're putting into the practice has a value, you know, and that we're not spending too much time on these the administrative part that can really wear a lot of people down sometimes. You know, there's, you know, already the caregiver burnout from supporting families, but then also the, oh my God, I'm drowning in paperwork. I'm drowning in trying to maneuver through the systems and try and understand the legal aspects. So that's great. So you guys basically had a relationship for a couple of years, virtual, and then met up to be able to become this powerhouse to provide us with amazing information and skills.
Yeah, it was really fun to just spend 3 days together in Philadelphia last weekend.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. So Melissa and Renee were at the USLCA conference last week, right?
No, that was in May.
Oh, in May. Oh,
And we
sorry.
were there's the Lactation Consultant in Private Practice Conference that happens in Philadelphia. And this was a brand new one that was geared toward business and working in offices. So it
Oh,
focused on that, no clinical stuff really whatsoever.
Yeah, it was all business.
Mhm.
oh, fabulous.
Yeah, it was fantastic and exciting, and um,
Lots of
I
Inspiring.
took a lot away from it.
lots of energy there, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I mean, the bottom line is if we can't make this a field that people earn a living in, we will all go away, or it's just, or lactation will only be provided by people who are doing this as a hobby.
Mhm.
And that means there's just a certain type of person who is able to do this work, right? Somebody who has another income with spouses or partners. And so we want it to be that we can attract people to our profession who really need to make a living and can make a living, and to
I re-
change that disparity.
Yeah. So that was one of the gaps that you each have noticed. Are there any other gaps that, you can just give us a glimpse into what we may be discussing on Sunday at the conference?
Melissa, you want to talk about
Yeah.
that?
In our talk, we talk a lot about when it comes to being efficient, there's a lot at stake for us, and it's a lot of things that we've already talked about today. It's not just about when what kind of initially inspired this conversation was hearing a lot of talk on social media, especially from newer IBCLCs, but also from some longtime seasoned IBCLCs that really struggle with their consult efficiency. And at that, initially those conversations were taking place among private practice lactation consultants that were doing home visits that were, I use an example of my own where I had a 4.5-hour home visit once that very quickly pointed out to me that was a big lesson, that like by the end of that consult, I was not very efficient or effective, and the family, we were all just exhausted, and it became quickly apparent that if I were to continue operating my practice on that level, I was going to burn out. I was not going to be very effective. My reputation in the community would be sacrificed. And so that's kind of like the background of how we started having these conversations. And we quickly learned then from there that it's not just about the private practice lactation consultants, especially when we started exploring where all the practice settings where other lactation consultants are. It's across the board. Everybody struggles with that. And where, for home visit settings where we're struggling to get a consult done in under 4 hours sometimes, hospitals, and hospital lactation consultants, they're struggling to get what they need to get accomplished in 5 or 10 minutes. So theirs is the total opposite end of the spectrum. And so it's our hope through this presentation that we can kind of, first of all, bring an understanding. Oftentimes when we're stuck in our own practice setting, we're not really aware of what challenges others are facing. And there's a lot of overlap with that when we're interacting with some of the same families. And so it helps us to have a little bit of compassion and understanding from where a family might be coming from who's worked with someone before us. But then also, helping to empower everyone in all of the settings to have some tools that they can take back to their practice and put into place that will help them to, just be more effective in helping families. And you mentioned the counseling skills, like that's a portion of what we talk about is, it's not just logistical tools that we can use in our consults, but also how can we have conversations with our clients that actually help to keep us on track and get them the support and the care that they need, while also honoring our own physical needs as lactation consultants and understanding our limitations. So that's It's been a fun talk to explore and put together for sure.
We're really excited, Pamela, because with the CLCA conference, because we have 2 hours, and it's just kind of funny. It's hard to stay on time when you're doing a talk on staying on time.
The irony, right?
Yes. And I think, people have suggested that we take more time to explain the specific counseling skills that we use. And I think in this talk, we're going to be able to get a little more in depth.
Wonderful.
And like Melissa hinted at, when we were putting this together, we realized we had about a 3-hour talk for an hour presentation slot, because there really is, you can really go deep with this. It's interesting. We thought it was just, here are some ways to stay on time, but it turns out there's a lot more involved, emotionally, and just how we feel about certain things.
Mm-hmm. I think that there's probably many LCs listening that have had a similar experience that you mentioned, Melissa, of having that 4.5-hour consult with a family, right? It just, in the moment that it's, even the technical part is still struggling, you can tell that, the parents are probably worn down and ready to throw the towel in, but you're just struggling to help maintain it. And potentially there might be some tears. Right? So
on both sides.
What's that?
On both sides.
Right?
On both
Exactly.
sides.
Yes, exactly, on both sides. It is, it's definitely a very vulnerable time for a family. And when you walk into vulnerable situations as a healthcare provider, that puts you in a vulnerable position. So having these skills that you will be bringing to us at the conference is going to be such an amazing asset for us as we all go back to our practice, whether, like you mentioned, whether it's in the hospital, a doctor's office, private setting, or the other thing that will be neat about this conference is that there'll be other different professionals from different backgrounds as well too. So that also will be able to use this in their healthcare practice as well too, because consult efficiency, I'm sure the content will be able to cross many different sectors, right? At the end of the day, when you're working with families and trying to ensure that we're being respectful to their time, but also providing effective care at the time will be so important. And I do love that we will be touching on the counseling skills and that you have time to explore that with us. As LCs, we have a lot of opportunity to learn more about the technical aspect, and which is really important because it's an evolving profession. As research continues to come out, we keep learning more and more about situations of baby at breast or not at breast. But sometimes the hardest part is working, kind of blending the counseling skills, the coaching skills, with still maintaining that technical aspect. Because at the end of the day, they didn't hire us to be their life coach, right? But in the same breath, we're kind of blending some of that together with our expertise at the same time. So that's great. I'm really excited to meet you guys. And I think that all the attendees are going to learn so much from each of you, and I'm really excited to learn. I know for myself, I'll be able to bring back a lot. I'm sure. I looked at your outline. I was like, oh yeah, I'll be learning. So,
okay. Hope so.
I hope so too. So, has there been anything particular that that you've learned in your journey of learning about the consult efficiency, the business aspect, that really has made an impact on how you practice today?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's been a lot just while we were putting this presentation together and being kind of forced to evaluate my own practice style in order to just glean tips from my own practice and bring that to the presentation. Just that personal reflection that's taken place through this process I have no doubt it's made me a better, more effective lactation consultant, and I've been practicing for 10 years. So to be able to say that at this point in the game is, we can't stop learning, and that self-reflection and evaluation is pretty important. And so I'm grateful that we've put this presentation together for that reason, not just because it's been fun and I enjoy sharing with everyone, but because it's, you know, it's just given me an opportunity to pause and self-reflect.
Totally. I would add to that, and I brought this up at the last time we did this talk, just last weekend, is that I'm more self-aware because it's just really in my mind, all of this stuff. And when I have a moment in a consultation, then I'm like, oh, I have to remember to like integrate this into our talk. And I've learned some of my personal triggers at consultations that tend to make me go on too much or be ineffective in some way. And that's really helpful because I can go, okay, this thing over here is going to be a problem for me. So I have to make sure that I take care of that in some way so that I can be better at what I do. So yes, it's it constantly learning and watching how, you know, when we actually in the moment using a particular technique and going, oh, this worked. So yeah, it is kind of fun to talk about it and then go back and do it.
Yeah, bring it to life in your own practice too.
And learning, you know, I think both of us brought things from our own practices, but we also got information from other lactation consultants to bring to our discussion as well. And that also is such a great thing to incorporate.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about some of the, you know, maybe during your presentation about certain triggers, because I always wonder, why am I able to get through this consult easier or more efficiently or in a better time managed situation, and then other ones that are like, okay, I feel like I'm kind of going in circles here. So this is great, and I think that there's a lot of listeners right now that are probably reflecting on some of that as well too. So I really thank both of you for being here with me. I know we're just days away. You guys are probably really busy getting ready for it and managing your own practice as well too. So I'm excited to meet you guys, and yeah, we'll see you in 8 days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye.